go ahead and call the Animal Shelter Advisory Committee for 8/15/2024 to order. Do I have a motion to begin?
You don't need me to
Nope, okay. Okay. At this time, we'd like to take a pause for any public comment.
Good afternoon. I'm Bob Solis. I'm the Director of Neighborhood and Family Services. I want to let the board know that we are working on a temporary shelter in anticipation of the major renovation at the shelter. We have identified the location. We have developed the plans, and now we're in the permitting process. Hopefully, construction will begin sometime in a month or so. Okay.
Awesome. That's great news. Thank you. All right. Any other comments at this time?
I do have one item for public comment as well. Today, August 15th, as this airs live, is National Check the Chip Day. So if your pet is microchipped, or you want to make sure that it's microchipped, or you just want to make sure that the microchipped information is your current registration, for example, if you moved a couple years ago and you want to make sure that that address is accurate, definitely touch base with your microchip implant company. If you need help tracking down who that is, you're welcome to stop by the shelter anytime, Monday through Friday, 10 to 6. We're happy to walk you through that process and make sure that any microchip you have in any of your pets is current and accurate and up to date.
And most microchip companies, when they update it, is only $13 to $15 max if they on that part, from what I've seen.
Sure, and if you got your pet microchip through one of our clinics or they're at the shelter, it's through 24 Pet Connect, and you can just log in and change your information on your own, but we're happy to assist if you need it.
Sweet. Does anyone else have any public comment at this time?
Can I just ask a little more clarification on the first speaker? Where is that temporary shelter going to be? I'm new, so y'all probably know this. I don't, so.
Let me get you some information. They want us to be careful of just public comment and not dialogue in this section, but I do think it's important for the group to get the most recent presentation we did on that. So if I can get that to you shortly.
All right, that'll work.
Could you get a couple of copies of that?
Yeah, I'll send it out to the whole group.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Did you want to come up, sir?
Jamal Shumpert, single member, district number 3. Today I'm up here talking about the leash ordinance, about where you can't have your dog on a leash more than 2 hours. I was up here last time talking about it, and like I said, I looked it up by the state of Texas, and you can have your dog on a leash all year round as long as you're not harming them and you're giving them water. But our problem is I think we're going too far, and it's becoming more of a problem with people getting bit. And if you had the leash law where maybe, you know, the aggressive breeds could be leashed longer than those 2 hours, you would probably see a lot lower on getting bit. And then sometimes you may have owners who just give up on dogs who run away so much, and their enclosure isn't just really good. So they'll sneak out and just say, hey man, this dog's run away 7 times. If he doesn't come back, we're not gonna get him. And now that's another problem on the city. So having that leash law, I think is effective. And I looked up why they might create a leash law where it's no longer than 2 hours. And it was because of like welfare reasons. And in San Angelo, if you have your dog on a leash more than 2 hours, your neighbor or somebody is definitely gonna go by there and call or say something. And beyond that, when it comes to dogs in the park and homeless people, maybe we could create a fund to give them leashes. You know, they can't afford leashes, and their dogs run around free in the in the Bosque area. I guess that's about it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right. Is there anyone else who wants to make a public comment at this time? Okay, all right. So looks like we're going to go ahead and move on to our next agenda item. We're going to consider approving the April 18th Shelter Advisory Board regular meeting minutes. Do you have a motion to approve?
The consent agenda is listed as a slate that we can take
Sorry.
both those items together.
Sorry.
If we want to move it off consent agenda for any discussion, we sure can. but as it stands, we can consider both of those items at the same time.
Okay. And then, do we also want to go ahead and approve the consideration for the revised animal shelter committee bylaws as well?
If a committee member would like to move that to regular agenda, we can,
I would like to meet, just simply because I'm new and I'd like to ask some questions.
for sure.
Perfect. Okay. Do I have a second?
If you want to take a motion on the consent agenda
Sorry,
as it remains.
Can I have a motion to approve those items and transfer that one item to the regular agenda?
I'll make a
Correct.
motion.
Okay. Anyone second?
I'll second the motion to leave A on the consent agenda and move B to the regular agenda.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any against? Okay. Items approved, and moving on to, moving item B to the, from the consent agenda to the regular agenda. So do we want to start with item B from the consent agenda first, or do we want to move on to the monthly shelter performance?
We'll do bylaws next, since it's
Bylaws.
listed next on the agenda.
Okay, just wanted to ask since I didn't know if the presentation had any changes.
And I can do an overview if you have specific questions, it's your preference.
I looked at it, and thank you for sending that to me. And again, I'm new, so y'all may probably discuss this ad infinitum, and I'm sorry. Why are you changing the quorum number? Because you changed the quorum number, if I understood correctly, to 3. And that's not even a majority of the committee, so I'm just trying to understand the basis of changing a quorum. I would think that you would need to have at least, just good governance, that you would need a majority of whatever committee to be the quorum. I know on the Fort board, we have sometimes struggled and had to wait 15 minutes for somebody to show up, so we would have a quorum, but nonetheless, I still think, and am I wrong? Did y'all change it to 3? Or is it changed in the presentation? Not that y'all did it, but is it changed in the presentation?
That's a really good question, and I apologize that I wasn't clear enough in the background that there is a bit of history to this item. So the state requires us to meet 3 times annually, and under the previous bylaws, that was 4 members, and we struggled to do that in 2023. We're actually non-compliant with state law. We did not meet 3 times. And so there was a previous agenda item before this committee to reduce the committee size, but that is declined, that is no longer happening. And so in the memo, the cover memo, we referenced that old presentation, and I apologize that in the actual bylaws before you, it clarifies that it is 7
members and
7 members, and 4 members shall constitute a quorum. So it's
Okay,
that
thank
last
you, because I
paragraph.
just thought moving it to 3 for a quorum was probably just not a wise decision.
Well,
I mean, you need to have a majority of your committee. I didn't realize y'all had, I didn't realize you struggled to get a quorum here, but again, after seeing the Fort and seeing how they've struggled sometimes, and we've had to wait for people to show up. I know that everybody has conflicts and everybody
Yeah.
has, so y'all gotta send me a reminder, because sometimes I just forget stuff.
Well, and everyone's busy, yeah.
Oh,
So,
yeah,
so I apologize for the confusion and appreciate that we could move this to regular to clarify that this is not changing the committee makeup at all, that we're maintaining and staying at 7 members with the 4 state-required members, the 3 at-large members, and that the quorum is required to be 4 members to even call the meeting to order or do any business in the public meeting.
Okay, well, that was my only question. I was just concerned about the quorum number.
Yes, ma'am. And, yeah, that was, I think maybe last meeting or something along that, we had, the presentation to council had been rejected, and then, so we were kept to that size. And then we were fortunate enough to gain quite a few new members, which has been really grateful. So
Yeah.
grateful that y'all showed up to.
Yes, thank you all for agreeing to serve.
All right. So now do we go ahead and move on to item A of the regular agenda?
I'll need minuted action to consider the bylaws if there's someone willing to
Sure.
support approval.
Do I have an action to support the bylaws as presented? Great.
You're asking, I'm sorry, I didn't,
Do we have a motion to approve the bylaws as presented? Sorry, my bad.
with that correction.
With that
I'll
correction.
make a motion to,
Yes, with that correction, sorry.
Present the bylaws or as amended with the correction that 4 is a quorum.
Yes.
I'll second that.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Moving on. So now we're going to go to regular agenda item A, discussion and possible action for the shelter performance numbers for April of 2024.
Thank you. So since we met, we wanted to go over our monthly performance for each of the months since our last meeting. So for the month of April, we had 207 new arrivals come into Animal Services custody. That breakdown was 103 dogs, 79 cats, and the remainder were wildlife and livestock. 83 animals were adopted or transferred to rescue. 42 animals were redeemed by their owner. 11 of the wildlife came in, were released back to the wild, and we had 33 animals that either died in custody or were euthanized. And I do have some more information on that on a subsequent slide. We had 270 animals left in custody at month end. And our live release rate for the month was 80.4%. Of the animals that died, 16 were, and this again includes both deaths in custody and euthanasia, shelter euthanasia. So that was comprised of 16 cats, 9 dogs, and 8 other. We had 4 raccoons, 3 skunks, and 1 possum come in beyond rehab. We do work with rehabilitators who are duly licensed by the state, but these were 8 animals that were beyond any kind of treatment or rehab that was available. In the raccoons, we do see canine distemper, that was a good bit of that. And then in these skunks, those were all animals that were injured that could not be released.
And do we send all those raccoons that have the distemper, because I know that can appear similar to rabies, do we send all those off for rabies testing in each case, or do we just only do that if it's a bite?
That's a good point. That to clarify, there's not a real reliable distemper test, and we would want to prioritize staff safety for testing any wild animal. And so when I said distemper, and what I meant to say was they were showing signs consistent with distemper. If they're acting neurologic and having the twitchy and the unexplained paralysis, we will consider rabies testing as well, because that is a concern if there was exposure to a person or other animal. So if we just find a raccoon, or it's called in that, hey, this raccoon looks sick, and we respond, if nobody handled it with bare hands, if no dog attacked it, anything like that, we would simply euthanize and dispose of the animal. But if there was any exposure to any other animals or people, or a concern, for example, in the past we've had such an animal near like a school or daycare, we may just want to go ahead and test to be, extra cautious. But it's not our standard practice to test for rabies if there was no known exposure.
Fair enough. Okay. All right.
Another way to break down the number of animals deceased, 28 were sick or injured, and 5 were aggressive dogs. Our live release rate by type is listed here. Of course, the bulk of the animals leaving are 40% transfers out to local rescue, which is by and large our partnership with Concho Valley Paws. So that's animals being transferred to them for foster, adoption, medical treatment, anything like that.
Is that a pretty low number for adoptions? I mean, I realize you transfer them over to another entity, but when you have 0.5% adoptions?
So that's non-cat and dog. So the city, on our side, we do the adoptions for any animal that's not a cat or dog, mostly livestock. So
Like
chickens,
horses?
goats, if we had horses, yeah. And so so the 40% transferred out includes all cats and dogs going to adoption.
Okay, thank you.
Yes,
I'm
of
new.
course.
I'll keep
No,
asking
it's
y'all.
definitely,
good
that's
questions.
definitely a good question, and definitely a good.
Are all of the transfers, is the first transfer always to Concho Valley Paws, or do you include other rescue groups?
No, other rescues are included in that, and so if another entity, now, Concho Valley Paws does coordinate any rescue transfer, so if there is another entity pulling, we do outcome that to, whoever's taking the animal, but it is maybe a dozen a year of the hundreds of animals that are transferred out. It's by and large, the majority of that is to Concho Valley Paws.
And is there any breed-specific outreach
Absolutely, yeah.
from the animal shelter? For example, being a border collie, greyhound, Labrador,
That is part of the work that Concho Valley Paws provides for us. So if I have a good-looking Doberman, for example, come in, Jen and her team are going to work ahead of time and say, once this animal's off its stray release, is it eligible? Is this an animal y'all are willing to take? And they leave no stone unturned with all of that. We also offer it as a first response to somebody wanting to own or surrender their pet. So if somebody is saying, look, I've got a purebred Shih Tzu that I can't have anymore, we recommend, reaching out to the breeder where you originally bought it, or a pure breed rescue, because we exist to serve the most vulnerable pets and people. And if there is a pure breed rescue out there, that is, a first response and gets a lot more information to the pure breed rescue as far as this pet's medical background, demeanor, any of that. So we work closely with pure breed rescues, but they're full and have to say no a lot, but we always ask.
How do I turn this?
You're good.
Does Concho Valley Paws offer transport to rescues outside of San Angelo? And are we partnering with any of the statewide or even national organizations like a Boxer Rescue, for example, or do we only do that in San Angelo?
No, we transfer to any state that will take them.
Okay.
We also go out of the country, just wherever we can get them, we move them.
Awesome, thank you.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that, ma'am.
Yeah, we transfer out of state and out of country, and just wherever we can find places for animals, we'll go.
Yeah, you make a very good point. And as some years back, I moved here from the Chicago area, and I was involved with a couple of rescue groups there. And they were very breed specific. And I'll use golden retrievers for an example because that's what I was really involved with. But the two groups that I was involved with in the Chicago area would absorb golden retrievers like a sponge. They didn't care where they came from. As a matter of fact, they even took some from Puerto Rico and Haiti. So there's no doubt in my mind that they would be interested in San Angelo.
Yeah, we typically don't have any issue finding a purebred dog a home, a rescue, a home, or anything. I mean, as soon as a golden retriever hits the website, we've got 200 people that want the dog. We don't always do straight adoptions, and sometimes we prefer to transfer to another rescue, just depending on what the issue is, health, all of that of the animal. But yeah, no, purebred animals are not San Angelo's problem.
Yeah, and to carry that thought forward just a little bit further, the guy I live with came from Border Collie Rescue and Rehab, and I picked him up in Dallas.
Yeah.
And so there's. I just wondered if there were if what I mentioned the other rescue groups, and honestly I don't know if the other rescue groups locally are really breed specific. I don't know that other than the one I dealt with.
There are some, but
Yeah.
And so I just wondered if maybe if there was more, if they understood that they had a direct connection. I'm not putting Paws down at all. I think y'all do fantastic work. I can't praise you enough. I'm just saying that might be simpler for someone just to, go straight to source.
yeah. I think that's happening at the fullest extent.
I think that's a lot of the reason that we encourage people to reach out to purebred rescues. If they have a purebred, they need to rehome first because, they'll take them very quickly.
It's an easy transaction, and you don't need our bureaucracy
Yeah.
involved in it.
Okay, all right, fair, I get it.
Okay.
Also for April, the operations in field services included 479 total cases. 270 of those were ASOs responding to stray or at-large animals. 87 were different forms of enforcement and follow-up checks on compliance. 55 of the cases in April were wildlife relocation. 41 were bite investigations, which is our most time takes the most, our biggest investment in time for investigations. 21 were transports, and that includes, for example, deceased animal pickup. And then 5 were either owner released or court seizures to intake in the field. So 479 total cases worked in April.
And how long would you say that a bite case would take to work on average?
So for a bite case, the initial response to collect evidence, to post the legal notices for requirement for quarantine, is going to take about an hour for that initial investment. Then we do the follow-up. So for example, when we respond to a scene where a bite has happened, and state law, of course, requires us to respond to any bite where an animal has bitten a person, and then city ordinance also requires any animal to animal. So this can be a dog bit another dog, a dog bit a cat. So any of those take about the same amount of work. And so we're going to post the notice to quarantine or provide it to the owner, just hand it to them, and they have 24 hours to make their arrangements. They can do it right then and there if they're ready to proceed. But at that point, they can consider, A, do they still want to own this pet, or do they want to consider euthanasia because their pet has bitten somebody? Or B, do they want to explore if they're eligible for home quarantine or quarantine at a vet of their choosing, or quarantine there at the shelter, because of course we provide quarantine services. So there is that follow-up the next day, that if they didn't immediately enter a quarantine at that first interaction, the next day the animal services officer follows up to confirm whatever action has been taken. In the event they don't comply with that 24-hour notice, we work closely with the municipal prosecutor to file a failure to quarantine. If they do comply and enter a quarantine, we continue observations of that animal. If it is quarantined there at the shelter, it's a twice daily observation, so it doesn't take much time, but is a requirement daily. If they are quarantined off-site, either at a veterinary clinic or at home, we check 4 times during the 10-day period. Then on the final day of the 10-day observation, we release that animal from quarantine if still healthy and not showing any signs of rabies, and that takes maybe 30 minutes to observe the animal, do the release back to the owner, and notify the victims that no rabies was found. In the event an animal becomes symptomatic of rabies and testing is recommended, then of course the euthanasia and obtaining the specimen to submit to the state is an additional time on that as well. So it's really a 10-day process with varying time spent on it each day.
I have a question about stray response. Generally, how does do you send an officer out or someone to respond from a call, or is this or is it observational by the officer in the field, or how do most of those come about?
So it is a combination of both proactive and reactive, responding to calls for service and self-initiating calls. The majority of it is individuals reporting stray dog at large. And so folks can report that by calling animal services Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. We also accept complaints via email, although for something time sensitive like a dog running loose, we would not recommend that because it's not, immediate in real time. We also offer after hours on call for emergency calls. So for example, if it's an aggressive dog at large, or if it's a dog at large at a school or daycare, that would escalate to an after-hours emergency call as well. So the majority of these are individuals calling it in and reporting it, but it also does include self-initiated response by the animal services officers just in their regular routine patrol, or while responding to another unrelated call, they also initiate a case for a stray response.
And are they, I'm going to have to assume that the animal control officer knows his turf, so to speak. So he knows when somebody's pet is outside the gate. They're good at differentiating between that and a stray.
Well, so for it to be stray, it would have to be in the city right of way. It would have, and so if a dog is in its own front yard, that's not technically stray. That's still on private property. But when we do encounter because this also includes stray livestock, so if there's like a goat running loose, which is the lesser of the 270 cases, but really just to speak to all species, we're going to attempt to get that animal secure and back on premises and speak to the owner, because we'd like to start a case management of, hey, let's do a free fence inspection. Let's talk about spay neuter and all the other requirements they're required to do. If I simply impound their animal and they don't come for it, it's not tagged, it's not chipped, within a couple months they're gonna have a new dog and they're just gonna have this same problem again. So for example, if a dog is running loose in the 1700 block of Volney Street and it keeps going back to this one blue house, well, we're gonna knock on the door, we're going to call the water customer of that address. We're going to knock on the door next door and say, this dog really wants to be here. And perhaps we speak to somebody who says, oh, I'm at work. How did my dog get out? Well, we're going to secure it in your backyard. We're going to be really confident that it's going to stay here. And we're going to follow up later. What time do you get off work? Because we can talk about citations and enforcement, continued follow-up for compliance on rabies vaccine, spay neuter, microchip, all of those things that are required in addition to secure enclosure and keeping your dog secure. So we want to do kind of a whole house response and not simply, here's a dog, let's pick it up and impound it. That certainly is a good bit of what we do. You saw the number of dogs coming in. So as a comparison, we went to 270 stray responses, but only 207 animals came in April. All manner, field services and across the front counter. And so there's a lot of that management happening at the household level. There's also a lot of, we get the call for stray animal, we respond, and the animal's no longer stray, no longer running loose, we can't find it, or the owner's already secured it. That you can run the gamut of outcomes once we start a case. But this is simply documents that an ASO received a call or created a call and had a response.
One of the first things I noticed when I moved here, because I was keen on that, was the amount of loose roaming animals in the San Angelo area. I mean, I lived in the neighborhood I lived in. Everybody had a dog. And rarely there was a dog out. I mean, it was an accident if it happened, you know. I have a relationship with a local rail port. Out of that facility, we have rehomed 5 dogs. I mean, you know, I didn't realize until I read the city ordinance that, you know, after 3 days of watering them, we owned them. But we rehomed 5 out of there.
What used to, and it's been several years ago, if y'all picked up a stray, or the city picked up a stray, and the owner didn't come for it within 72 hours, then whether y'all did it or not, the pound, did it or not, they could euthanize the animal. Is that still your policy?
Well, it's still allowed, but we do pursue all life-saving opportunities first, like reaching out to Pure Breed Rescue, All Breed Rescue. Our return to owner rate for San Angelo is really high for the industry. I mean, we try to work services to get.
I just think that, so, and I just give you an example, simply because I had a friend this happened to. They went out of town, somebody was supposed to be watching their dog. That dog got out of the gate on a Thursday, the people didn't come back till Monday. When they finally got there on Tuesday, the dog had already been euthanized. And understandably, they were devastated. And I thought, why would anybody be so quick, especially over a weekend, to put down a dog and not give somebody the opportunity? So I didn't know if that was just old policy or if it was still the
About what
policy.
time frame was that?
This is probably 5 or 6 years ago, well, probably 8, because it was before I moved to Bentwood, so it would have been 8 years ago.
We've changed everything since 2016. We changed everything about how we do business. And so, for example, the 72 hours, we are legally by city ordinance required to keep animals 3 days after their day of arrival if they're not tagged or chipped. If a dog does have a tag or a microchip or is well,
identification.
we're required to keep it for 7 business days before it's available for adoption or other final outcome like euthanasia. So that's why we really push, the city offers microchipping for $13. It's a really great deal, no annual fee. And so most any family can afford that. It is required by city ordinance, and that saves you a lot of time. That if an animal services officer responds in the field, I can get that pet back to you right away. We deliver, like we're already patrolling the area. Or if your pet comes in but it has a microchip, it buys you time for getting that pet back to you.
I just think, and again, I'm new, so if y'all,
No,
I'm tired of
no.
my questions, I'm sorry. I
No.
won't ask somebody next time.
Actually,
It was my understanding
good to
that
have
it was the
questions.
goal to have a no-kill facility. I thought that years ago, the Wall Sloggers gave a pretty large chunk of money to try to help facilitate that. I could be wrong. But I thought the goal of the city's animal services was to try to get to be a no-kill facility. And so when I see 60 and 80 and 33, animals every month being, I can't imagine if they all died as soon as they got to the facility, so I'm assuming they were euthanized. That's a significant number of animals. I know everybody here loves animals, but that's a lot of animals to put down. Do they just go through there every day and say, okay, we're going to kill 5 today? Or, on Friday we have 17 too many, so let's just pick the 7. I'm just asking. 80 is a lot of dogs to put down in 1 month, and that's what is on your list for 86 dogs for August. No, wait, wrong date. I don't know what month that is. Anyway,
And we can
Yeah.
skip to that next agenda item to speak to, but we haven't euthanized for time or space since 2017, 2016. We only consider euthanasia in sick or injured beyond treatment or aggression that can't be interrupted. So when we talked about like the wildlife that can't be rehabbed, we try everything to save an animal. And I agree that the animals dying is too many, but we've hit 90% as a community twice in the last couple years. We're going to miss it this year. And I think that that's fair to speak to, but the first and foremost thing Animal Services was created for was for public safety. And so we've got to address dogs at large. We've got to address and reduce the number of animal bites, the number of animals being hit by a car and injured, the number of animals being running loose. And so life-saving can happen to the extent we're addressing those things first. But both go hand in hand, that when we can do life-saving programming and work, for example, in target neighborhoods where we do see more dog at large, and partner with those households and those communities to have fully responsible and compliant pet ownership, then that will reduce the number of animals coming in the shelter, the number of animals running loose, and the number of animals being euthanized.
and with COVID, people got dogs and cats, and then I guess they went back to work, or they didn't have to be home anymore, and they've just dumped a larger, I know that.
Well, and the stats we're seeing nationwide don't support that. We may anecdotally know households that happened to, but our shelter intake for 2024 is much less than it was, for example, in 2019. And that's due to a number of things, but individuals reaching out to want to own or surrender their pets or dumping their pets, they're not citing COVID or that they got the pet in 2020 as a reason, and we've not seen an increase in dog at large or an increase in shelter intake since then.
Well, that makes me feel better.
Yeah, we refer to a lot of like national databases just to be sure, like we want to do what makes sense for San Angelo, and we want to do what is what makes sense for our community, but we also want to rely on, what are other communities doing that works well, and what are the national stats reporting. And so that's something we're seeing from the national databases that all the pets acquired during COVID, and 2020 was one of the years that we hit 90% save rate for all species, all animals, that we're not seeing those animals bounce back. We're not seeing that coming into a shelter environment.
Well, if you're saying that the 33 that were deceased were either sick, injured, or aggressive, and yet I see stuff on Facebook and other entities about, we've got to get 17 dogs adopted by Friday or the pound's going to euthanize them.
And every single one of them have been saved to date.
No, I know that, but my point is those 17 dogs that they're out there telling the public, please come. I got one of those dogs several years ago. So what I'm saying is, you're telling me that the only ones that y'all are euthanizing are either sick, injured, or aggressive, and yet we see these blasts on Neighborhood Bentwood or this or that. Facebook, we've got to get these 17 dogs or these 12 dogs or however many there are, and if we don't get them adopted out, somebody takes them, fosters them, whatever, they're going to get put down. So I'm confused
Well,
because if they're putting them out for adoption, then they're not sick, injured, or aggressive.
And I
yet
haven't
it's-
euthanized them, right. So in the event that San Angelo Animal Services had to euthanize for capacity, we are going to make that decision as a community, that it's been long held as our culture that we do not euthanize for capacity. We give every opportunity to an animal. And so the final last-ditch opportunity to save an animal is to say, we are over capacity. There's a finite number of animals we can have. We're going to publish these faces, this list, this group. And if nobody comes for them and we have to euthanize them for capacity, then you're going to see a month with an additional bullet point that says 2 euthanized for capacity or 17 euthanized for capacity. We've not yet had to do that, but we know that there will come a point that this community can't step up for these animals and everybody's at their limit. So we are, and it's from my office that we pick these 20 faces. They've got to move today because our intake has been really high. For example, the last 5 days, we've taken in 22 dogs and we did not have 22 empty kennels. So that triggers an opportunity, an exigent circumstance to be over capacity for a minute, a finite amount of time to work life-saving. And so we have a deadline, we gave 4 days, Wednesday morning to Saturday close of business, that 20 dogs have to move by that date or they will be euthanized for capacity. And so for the month of August, you may see an additional bullet point here that says these 20 dogs euthanized for capacity, for space.
Thank you.
With that said, when we talk about having to euthanize for capacity, so there's 2 ways to address capacity. One is build more, which you can do forever, from what I can see in San Angelo anyway, or we can take an overarching view about intake. And by that I mean when I read ordinances. There's plenty of normal pet ownership ordinances to do the job here. And my question is, and it's a question, not a statement, is how do we enforce those ordinances? Do the animal control officers have the authority to do that? Do we rely on the police department to do it? How does that happen?
It's the cases I just referenced for April. That's the animal services officers going out and doing enforcement.
So is that person, I'm going to use the wrong word, but is that person deputized? I mean, is that
They're sworn in
person?
by the municipal court, and they hold a state license for animal control certification.
Do they have the authority to issue a citation?
Yes, we issue citations.
I mean, do they?
Yes,
On site?
yes.
Okay, very good.
So I think the unfortunate part of all animal-related problems is it's all secondary enforcement. They actually have to come in contact with the animals before anything can be done. We can't just go knock on doors and say, hey, is your pet fixed? Kind of thing. So in order to issue citations, or even if you know your neighbors 3 streets down have puppies in their backyard and they're going to be at the shelter next month, they have to come in contact with them through either a complaint or a bite or a dog at large or something of that sort. So everything is secondary enforcement.
And that's probably, takes me to my point. Would it be a fair statement to say that an animal control officer in San Angelo has the same basic authority as a game warden?
Absolutely not.
No.
Why is that?
The game warden has more authority than probably almost any law
Then,
enforcement.
yeah, even a San Angelo
They can
police
do a lot of
officer.
things that police officers can't do.
Well, my point with that was that the police department they have a level of authority that is well respected by our population, me included. Does an animal control officer carry that kind of authority?
No.
No. And so there's really, other than, and I have no idea what the fine structure is. I mean, I don't know. I hope I never find out. But contact with an animal control officer is basically an inconvenience. It's not anything that makes people consider their actions toward their animals.
Well, it is a summons to the municipal court. It's a citation, just like a speeding ticket. People are regularly arrested for failure to appear for our citations, or if a citation escalates to the level of non-compliance. So is it an inconvenience? Sure, but it's also a court process.
The telltale on it to me is the number of strays, frankly. I mean, it's just, the volume is just really high.
I think one thing that is probably not been mentioned yet is that we have, I believe, in the past requested more funding for additional ACOs, additional staff, and it has been denied. So,
Okay, that's what I was gonna ask. I'd like to
So
see the
that-
budget.
yeah.
I'd like to know
So
what the
I do
city
know-
council's doing.
okay,
If there's more money needed, why isn't it forthcoming? Because, not to interrupt you, people are pretty angry in the community in the last 6 to 8 months over what's going on. They're mad about the roach infestation out there. That was absolutely appalling. They're mad about hearing about, oh, they're gonna get euthanized if we don't pick them up by Friday, so everybody's scrambling, to get them, because there's not enough capacity. There is, whether it's true or not, there's a perception that private citizens have given significant amounts of money to try to alleviate in the past the situation that the pound is in, or the animal, whatever, the shelter. And it hasn't. They're concerned. I mean, it's depressing to go out there. And I know we're all gonna go out there because that's part of the role of being on this board, and I'm fine with that. But I've been out there, and it's very depressing. I mean, you work out there, you got to see how depressing that is. Y'all all do. And the fact that city council been out there, because every one of them should have gone out there in that roach infestation and seen what those dogs and animals were required to live in, because it bordered on criminal.
So I
It
think
was
I'm hearing
awful.
some future agenda items. I do want to be respectful of the agenda as it's posted and of everyone's time. So I think I'm hearing, do y'all want a future agenda item on capacity and enforcement at
And
a
budget.
future meeting, and budget?
Thank you. And thank you for keeping us back on track.
no problem.
If you want to,
Okay.
Or another one about barriers and access barriers for community members to access services. I'd like a larger discussion about that.
Okay. All right. So, do we approve the?
it doesn't require minuted action.
Okay, good deal. Let's move on to the next agenda item, discussion for the May 2024 numbers.
So May's intake did increase to 264 animals. That is quite common for this season, as kitten season started in earnest. So the intake was 106 dogs and 114 cats, and the remainder was wildlife and livestock. 108 were adopted or transferred out, 64 redeemed by owner, and 50 deceased, with a live release rate of 78.3%. The biggest issue You'll see this in May and even worse in June was panleukopenia in cats. The number of young kittens coming in with feline parvo started really affecting the shelter numbers in May and continued into June. So that is why you see that large number of cats dying there. So another way to break down those 50 deceased animals, 37 were sick or injured beyond treatment and 13 were aggressive. So we're sitting at, for the year, 19.8% of our animals are deceased. For May's field services, we had 413 cases, 223 were a stray response, so real similar to the prior month. 76 were enforcement and rechecks, so that is enforcing local ordinance, writing tickets, all of that. 33 were wildlife relocations, picking up trapped skunks, raccoons, possums. We had 38 bite investigations, so very similar to the prior month. 37 transports, like deceased animal pickup, and then 6 owner released and seized intake for the month of May.
All right. Any questions over this item? Or any other comments? Okay. Let's go ahead and move on to the June 2024 numbers as well.
All right, so our intake for June was at 214 animals, about 100 dogs, 100 cats.
Oh, no. I think I missed it too. He was bringing up, would there be public comment on each one? I think I got into
He
the
did ask for that, but
discussion
we can
and-
back up.
Yeah.
Okay. Any public comment?
Yeah, we can do it after each one, however you want to do. I think I got into the discussion and forgot to
Dr. Schulte
mention
did,
that.
but we can go back, or we can do it for June. Okay. So June, we had 86 animals that died or were euthanized. The majority of that was the panleukopenia animals coming into the young cats coming into the shelter with feline parvo, and then the spread of that as well. So of the 71 cats that died, about half of that was died in custody and half of that was euthanasia for being symptomatic or testing positive for feline parvo. So that is the vast majority of of why June fell so short with our live release rate of only 62%. Another way to break that down is 78 of those animals died because they were sick or injured, and 8 were aggressive. And so that did increase our deceased from the prior month to almost 22%. And then field services, similar intake, similar stray response. Enforcement and rechecks were up to almost 100. Wildlife decreased a bit. Bite investigations about the same. Transports about the same. And then 3 owner released or seized intake in the field. We had a small cruelty case that we worked in June and impounded those animals under court order. So that is your June.
Okay.
On the transports, volunteers. Is
No,
two
these are
paws
all animal services officers' cases and response in the field.
I'm sorry, say it again, I missed it.
This slide is depicting animal services officers' cases and responses in the field, in neighborhoods.
Oh, bring an animal in.
Well, or responding to a bite investigation, picking up dead animals.
Okay, all right. I took the rescue version of transport,
No, this is like, for example, one thing that we mentioned the process for a bite investigation earlier. One thing that we do offer, if there's a citizen who's like, I don't want my dog anymore, he bit somebody, I don't feel safe owning it anymore, and the dog's so reactive, I don't even feel comfortable like transporting it to the vet, that is a service we offer. We'll confirm your vet appointment, we will come beforehand, we will load up your dog with all of our PPE, meet the veterinarian generally at the clinic to sedate the animal and safely bring it inside with both groups of professionals working on that. So it's grouped under transports, but it can be a variety of things.
I'm slewing a little bit off the topic of that, but if someone has a deceased animal, is the animal shelter an option for them to help dispose of that
So we pick up deceased animals in the right-of-way, like in the street. Anybody can call that in. If an animal, if your pet has died, we do pick that up for a $25 charge, or you may come and use our trash receptacle to dispose of it. We don't offer cremation services or anything, but that is a free service if somebody wanted to come and bring their deceased animal.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, at this time, do we have any public comment?
Jamal Shumpert, single member, District Number 3. I just wanted to mention that when it comes to those diseases that happen, a high number of pets dying, maybe it's because we're not testing every pet. One time I saw on their wildlife, it was like 9 or 11 pets. If we test those 11 pets for rabies at least, or more than rabies, we might could find out if we're getting a disease in there and causing all those other animals to die. But that is kind of one of the priorities for the animal shelter, is for safety and health. So I do think we should test every animal for the least rabies, at least. Thank you. Wildlife. That's what thank you.
So, if we tested every animal for rabies, we would euthanize 100%.
He's saying wildlife.
Oh, sorry, wildlife, my bad. But there is cost involved with that. So that would be something that I'd have to look at as far as budget, I believe. And then some diseases, as far as testing goes, such as parvo and distemper, those are viral diseases. They can test negative upon intake, and within the next 7 to 14 days can turn positive. So unfortunately, there's still always going to be a degree of risk. And it is not common practice in protocols for shelter medicine to test everything upon intake unless they're suspicious at that time. So just to give you a little information on that. Okay, any more public comment at this time? Okay, all right, moving on to shelter numbers for July of 2024.
So July intake was at 225 animals, 113 dogs, and 88 cats. So we saw a bit of relief as kitten season waned a bit in July. We also had 23 wildlife impounded and 1 livestock. We had a loose goat come in. So 103 animals were adopted or rescue transferred. Owner redemptions were down to 32. Just a tough time getting pets back to people. 21 animals were wildlife released. We had 60 deceased, so another tough month with 295 animals left in custody. Under our purview, that was 178 dogs and 117 cats. And then 72% of animals were released alive. So a big improvement from June. Of those 60 animals that died, 34 were cats, 24 were dogs, and 2 were possums that came in that were injured. Another way to break that down is 45 of those animals were sick or injured beyond treatment. So we did see our year-to-date outcomes by type, that deceased item there that we're always watching so closely, that, of course, our aim is to have that at about 10%, that 90% of our animals are leaving by live methods, and 10% or less are dying in custody or being euthanized, and we are sitting at 22% for the year as of end of July. So it's been a tough year for performance on that route. 4 field services cases. Animal Services had 256 stray responses, 50 enforcement and rechecks, 41 wildlife relocations, so a bit up on that category, 54 bite investigations, only 6 transports, so a big decrease there, and 4 either owner released in the field or seized intake under court order.
Investigations include the police department or just the animal control officer?
Just Animal Services officers. There's only police involvement if it escalates to a criminal event, which a bite investigation rarely does.
Okay.
Okay. Any other discussion about that topic right now? Okay. Any public comment on that item?
I see that y'all do have a lot of wildlife y'all are relocating. I'm not sure, I couldn't find if y'all are accepting a wildlife relocation fee. Maybe that could help with some of your funds. And as Chairman mentioned, maybe y'all should review your policies because he mentioned and quoted policy to me, but that policy is to stop the deceased number from rising. So maybe if y'all go back and look at that policy, I know other cities are doing the same policy, but maybe we should be a little bit different. Thank you.
All right. Any other public comment at this time? Okay. Any follow-up or administrative issues?
I actually have just one thing to mention, just letting you all know this will be my last meeting. I've resigned to go be a mama for a little while, so I had a baby in March, and so I'm going to resign as an attorney for a while and take care of her, but I'm leaving you in good hands. Kathleen Dabbert will be taking over for me. She's currently our municipal prosecutor, so her knowledge of the prosecution of these types of cases is incredible. She does a lot of that, so she can hopefully add to a lot of that discussion as well. So,
Awesome. Congratulations.
thank you.
All right. Anything else at this time? Okay. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I so move. I so move.
Okay. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
All right. Motion approved. Meeting is ended at 12:56. And that's that.